Good afternoon, everybody. How's it going? Thursday, 3 o'clock on the dot. It's not very often that we actually start right on time, so hopefully that is foreboding of good things and a good conversation. This afternoon, I'm very lucky to be hosting one of my return guests, one of my favorite people, somebody who has really kind of been an inspiration for myself, as well as somebody who is very much an inspiration for me. And a lot of other people out there. So long story short, a very inspirational figure in the agave spirit space has opened some of the kind of most iconic mezcal and agave spirits places, concepts that a lot of us absolutely can't wait to visit for the first time or get back to, those being Mezonte Tasting Room and Pare de Suffrir in Guadalajara. My guest today, Pedro Jimenez, joining us from Guadalajara. Pedro, are you there, bud? How are you doing? Ahí está.
I'm here.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Pretty excited to be here again.
Thank you, man. I appreciate. I know that I feel like every time I talk to you, you're either on your way out to visit producers or on your way back. So I'm glad that we were able to catch you on a Thursday when you're in town. I'm really glad to see you. Very happy to talk to you anytime I can. I always come away learning so much. And hopefully, I think, speaking of learning things, we'll do a little bit of a brief intro here in just a moment. But don't let me get too far into the conversation before actually getting you to talk to us about what exactly raicilla is. I think I skipped over that last time and just kind of went into my own kind of questions that my brain was tossing around. So hopefully this afternoon, those of you guys who are joining us that are not, one of the big mezcal geeks and are maybe just kind of found agave sessions through another channel and are new to agave spirits, Pedro's going to give us a great one-on-one kind of on how he explains raicilla, other agave spirits from Jalisco, because there are several different ones around, and just kind of how he thinks about agave spirits from his home state. So Pedro, first of all, let's start off. You're in Guadalajara. You own 2 bars. You own also a brand. Can you just kind of give us a really easy one-on-one of what you do and what your projects are?
Not so boring, man. No, come on, let's get to just. We have a mezcaleria here in Guadalajara. It's been over there for a little bit more than 11 years. We have a kind of like a cantina that is kind of brand new. It's just turned 3 years, and we have the tasting room, an information room that is Mezonte. So it's just our love for agave spirits, but what's behind them, that it's actually producers and their families. That's really, really what caught us to this world, to this universe, because we weren't, my wife and myself, Monica and myself, we weren't into any kind of business or restaurants or bars at all. We were more into the audiovisual arts. But that thing caught us, and it's just like part of our lives now. And well, what we try to do is to express and to transmit as clearly and the most clearly of what we perceive of agave culture. In any kind of way, from cultural aspect to biological aspect to legal aspects, everything that is involved in this situation, but mainly the social aspect. It's all the people that it's behind and around this culture is for us the most important thing. So what we've tried to do with all of these kind of projects is to just inform people, to transmit and to communicate as much as we can, and to get to the sources of information from different branches. We believe, my wife and I, we both studied communication, and we do believe that information through communication is the most effective and loyal weapon or tool to have access to appreciate and to understand deeply this spirit. So that's what we've been doing for a little bit more than 12 years. So kind of like that.
So it's basically kind of an in-person version of storytelling, which is really what you were doing when you were doing your filmmaking and AV stuff, you know? I mean,
Yeah, totally.
that's one of the things that I really focus on is just like how to transmit stories and knowledge, because those two things combined, I think, kind of lay the foundation for what makes a very strong connection for people to these spirits, especially those of us who are fortunate enough to spend as little time in Mexico as I get to, which is more than most, let alone you who spend so much more time than even I get to with these producers, is finding a way to connect people to those stories, to those people, and have a healthy, very big emphasis on a healthy appreciation for these spirits and the culture.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of easy. I always remember this story. Once there was like this crew from a hotel that is a very fancy hotel here in Mexico, and they introduced Mezonte into their hotel, just like these little amenities to give to guests. And so, but they were all very committed, and they sent a whole crew of bartenders here to Guadalajara to learn and to go visit the producers. I mean, the whole thing, they did it perfectly. I mean, those are it's from the hotel Rosewood Mayakoba, and it's an amazing hotel. But I was surprised because after all of this training of both in Guadalajara in this kind of like classroom set, and then we went to the producers, and well, we were with them for 3 days, walking, talking, looking at everything that they are doing there and how they're doing it, meeting their families and everything. And we went back just to a final session, and they were saying like, well, do you know what? It's going to be so easy because to kind of transmit this thing and to make it appealing for people, to customers, because all what you have to do is tell the truth. And this was like, yeah, well, yeah, because sometimes there's a lot of brand ambassadors or people like that are mostly PRs, or I mean, people are trying to sell something that are not completely convinced of what they're saying that they want you to sell. Mm-hmm. And for them, it was like, oh, finally, something that it's so easy to talk about and even to sell, because it's pretty clear and it's really honest what these guys are doing. And so amazing. All of these producers are beautiful, how to see them, how they work, and how beautiful the result comes along. I mean, it's just amazing spirits, and it's very easy just to say what you saw there and not try to learn this kind of script or anything like that. It's just like to tell what you lived and experience, and that becomes just like the best selling point. So it's just like, it's very easy to transmit what you just experienced and you saw and you talked about, because it's so involving. It's always a great experience. It's always a new things are coming along. I mean, I just came back from visiting Japo. There's a raicilla producer in the coast, and after 10 years, I just learned that there are 2 different varieties that I've never heard about. And it's just like the Maguey del Monte, and then there's another one that it's a Cenizo Chico. So I've never heard of them until 2 days ago. So it's always learning. It's always learning. It never stops. And that's kind of the beauty of it.
I'm actually kind of glad that you opened up this kind of, about the storytelling and being honest and how you talk about the spirits, because you don't need to market it a certain way. You don't need to fluff up certain details, right? And, just for those of you watching, I apologize. This is not how I envisioned our conversation going, in which order. When I sent Pedro the initial email, it never ever works out the way that I have it in my head, but that's totally fine. I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because it's something we didn't get to talk about last time, but I did want to ask you. So, I was really curious about what the youth culture response has been, like the young adult response in Mexico City or Guadalajara, and just kind of around Mexico, depending on how much you've traveled to see how people are responding to spirits, right? Because more and more as the brands get larger, right? We touched on kind of, you know, the growth in celebrity brands last time you and I spoke, how sometimes brand will overemphasize the religious aspect of it or the mysticism of mezcal. Do you see the, you know, the 20 somethings, the early 30 somethings who are going a lot to like mezcal bars and stuff like that? Do you see them responding to the kind of messaging and that people like yourself focus on, people like David Suro focus on, or do you really see them responding more to kind of the more glitzy, glamorous, mystic, celebrity kind of stuff? You know, because those kinds of things, there's so much money behind that type of messaging. A lot of times, it's really hard to fight that. You know, but here in the U.S., to my experience, I've seen a lot of the people that I talk to respond very well to the things that we really want to emphasize that we think are important. But, you know, Vago is a great example. Other really wonderful brands, we don't have the budget to fight that. But I'm just wondering if people are responding in a way that makes you hopeful for the direction that the category is going.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, and I've seen it in different places, and people do respond well to this type of communication and to these type of spirits because they already know. I mean, no one's been fooled that whatever is out there in a commercial, in advertisements, and everything is like a real thing.
Yeah.
Even if it's a very big celebrity, it's always like, well, you know, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, what's this guy like? This these guys from how do you call it? Well, Casamigos or
Yeah.
Los Hombres or whatever. I mean, all of these guys that are very big celebrities. I mean, there's always something that doesn't check. I mean, it's something like, but why these guys are doing that over there? I mean, there's more information out there, and I think more people are getting into that and reading more. And even if it's sometimes just a trend, or even if this kind of like speech that is being learned from people who aren't actually doing that kind of preservation for agaves and or mezcales, but they're talking about it, and people are listening. So they sometimes it's just like, I don't know exactly why or why. I mean, but these things doesn't make any sense to me if they're not produced in this kind of way, or if they're using all of these industrial machines. It won't be like a true mezcal. I mean, they might not have all of this knowledge of what's happening behind those brands, but they do acknowledge that there's something that is not completely like real, you know. It's not solid, something there. So I think that people, and especially because people more than any other time want to know where things that are being that they are eating or dressing or drinking, they want to know where they came from, how they were produced. So they start asking all of these questions and trying to find them in labels, in websites, or whatever. So I think that we might sometimes get a little bit misleaded with this advertisement, but there's always like this intuition in younger people, and they are looking for the real thing. I mean, something that is real. So I think that they are more perceptive and more sensitive to this kind of spirits and to the information that it's out there.
I'm really curious, you know, one of the things that just in this conversation that we're having, I kind of thought of is like one of the big differences I think between, at least that I see or that I can imagine existing between, you know, the Mexican domestic market and the US market and how people respond to these agave spirits. It in the US, one of the things that, you know, for us, for a lot of consumers here, it's a way to travel without traveling, right? It's a way to experience a different culture, right? It's kind of like it's a way, it's a form of tourism. But in Mexico, you know, is there a sense of of people reconnecting with their own culture in different parts of Mexico? Because I mean, even for myself, being from the borderlands, right? the more research I do, and I realize how long back in history my family, how far back my own personal family history actually goes into the agave spirits producing regions of Sonora, and how prevalent agave cultivation was in southern Arizona, where I grew up. So for me, it really is a much more about connection. And I don't think that's necessarily something that American consumers can always relate to for obvious reasons. But I'm wondering if that really does exist for people in Mexico, or if it really just is more about kind of people wanting to know where their food and where their drinks are coming from, and just kind of paying homage to the campesinos, right? That kind of romance of that long lost, kind of agrarian lifestyle, or if it's a deeper cultural connection, and if that really exists in Mexico.
I think it's part of both situations. On one side, yeah, there's like this big movement of reevaluating what's ours as Mexicans, as a cultural thing, as a link to our roots. But sometimes it's misunderstood. And sometimes with that misunderstanding comes along other things that are actually sometimes even against what real culture is. I mean, it's always like that. And sometimes there's like even like these meme pages of criticizing this kind of things, right? Like making everything so folkloric, no, with everything like bright colors and everything. And it's just like, well, yeah, it's part of our culture, but that's not all of it. And you don't have to dress it like that to become what it is, a Mexican culture. So it's kind of like a mixture, but it's a good thing. I think it's a good sign that people are now looking into what's happening in Mexico instead of just looking what's outside of Mexico. That was pretty much what was happening for the maybe last 40, 50 years. And probably like it started 20 years ago, that started shifting around the year 2000. And maybe that was one of the reasons that mezcal and other agave spirits became kind of popular. Because before that, even tequila was it was looked down as a very drink for the poor and drink for the people who didn't have any kind of culture and stuff like that. Same thing happened with mezcal, and now it's happening with other agave spirits like raicilla. And this might be a good moment to introduce what raicilla is.
Oh,
would you like that? Well, I mean, talking about agave spirits, there are different types of agaves all across Mexico. There are more than 220 different species in the whole world. In Mexico, there are 150 at least. And from those, 75% of them are endemic. So it's only growing here in Mexico. So obviously there's a biological center to these spirits in Mexico. So it's a thing that's always been there, even 10 million years ago, when the agave hermoplasm started and the first agaves were growing. It was Mexico the center of that. Right now, the last countdown of agaves that are used to distill spirits, it was 53 different species, and that becomes the most complex alcoholic drink that comes from that major diversity of species. And we always refer, for a simple comparison, to wine, that probably like 95% of all the wines that we drink, I don't know, Zinfandel, Merlot, all of these varieties, all of these are varieties that comes from just one single species, that is Vitis vinifera. So you're talking about a whole universe of varieties from just one species. But here in mezcales or agave spirits, you can find at least 53 species with hundreds of varieties. So it's a whole universe of possibilities. And all across Mexico, there are different names for these spirits. There were names for different types of agaves, for the agave plant, just like that. there were like more than 50 different names or more to this plant. But at the end, when the Spaniards were here in Mexico and became a colony, well, all of this changed, and it was just maguey and then just agave. But all of these names for varieties, all of this diversity and cultural richness, still there. So what's happening is that we're like looking at. I always like to give the example of Jalisco, and I will share my screen right now to show you a little map that can give us an idea.
Thank you, Pedro. The first screen share we've ever had on Agave sessions, man. It's nice to not just be looking at the face.
Well, it's a good thing we have a lot of materials, so we can dig into whatever you want to try to see or anything. So this is the state of Jalisco. Do you see my pointer, like my arrow here, like showing the places? Perfect. So right here in the center of Jalisco, it's Guadalajara. So that's what we're at. And right over there, like 100 years ago, it was only the place where tequila was produced. That's actually where the name comes from, that the volcano of tequila, that's just outside of the city of Guadalajara. But then it started to grow. A DO came along and blah, blah, blah. It became another thing. So the thing is that right here, well, it was tequila and other distillers from Tapalpa. It's a little town outside of Guadalajara. They also produce agave spirit. And if you go there and you say, well, is this tequila? No. Is this mezcal? No. Is this raicilla? No. This is called barranca. Okay. It comes from an agave, it's cooked agave? Yeah. So technically it would be a mezcal, but they don't call it mezcal, they call it barranca, right? If you go down south, you will find different names such as Tusca or Vino Mezcal or just Vino. And actually in this region that is a border with Michoacán, you can also find another name that is called Vino de Olla. But right here you can see Tusca, that comes from a region that is called Tuscacuesco, and that's where they took the name from. And Vino Mezcal, well, that's because they call mezcal to the plant, not to the distilled spirit. So it's Vino would be wine. So it's a wine that came from out of the plant of the mezcal. So this was a heritage of also from the Spaniards, the vino. So they used to call any kind of alcoholic beverage, they would call it vino. So actually nowadays, if young people even say, let's go for some vinos, they're not meaning that they want some grape wine. It's just like anything that is alcoholic, right? So that's because that's just what this became from. And then if you go to the west, you'll find raicilla that comes from this region from the west, and it is from the Sierra, most recent. And the origin of raicilla is here in the coast, and that goes way back to the commercial trade from Asia to America. So now the China was coming into this coast here and in Colima down here. So all of this coast was the first things that they were bringing to that brought the Filipino still. That probably we'll see some pictures later on. But this type of distillation, it was originated here and then moved to the center, going up to this area. But in all of these places, there were different names too, and still there are, still being used. Vino de Serra, Vino de Lechuguilla, Vino del Monte. So there's at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then if you go all the way up in the border with Durango, Zacatecas, Nayarit, there are these two from native communities out there from the Wirrárica and the Tepehuanes. They also produce agave spirits, and they are called Tepe and Tucci. So there are more than 10 different names for agave spirits in just one state, in Jalisco. Now, talking about raicilla, well, all of these names come from cultural things. They don't come from a governmental institution or an AC or a DO that's established that they should be called like that. People and culture through history gave name to those spirits in those regions, and it was because something, especially here was in tequila. Tequila was from the region, Tusca was from the region, Vino Mezcal was from the raw material, Barranca, that would be translated as kind of like cliff. It was named after that because all of these spirits were persecuted for different types of authorities. So they had to move their distilleries to places that were very inaccessible. So they will be hidden in between the mountains and cliffs and everything. So they call it Barranca. Raicilla is probably the one that there's no sure thing about why they started calling it Raicilla. There are some theories. Probably the most true and viable, it will be that they call raíz, like root, to the stem of the plant that goes out of the ground, and it looks like a root, but it's actually the stem. And they might call it like raíz, and they call everything to call it in a small version like raicilla. So it will be like a little root from the agave. And tepe, it's just because the community that makes it, they're called Tepehuanos, and Tucci, it's a word from the Wirráricas, that means spirit. So everything has a cultural background to it. And that's probably the most clear and transparent thing about agave spirits, that it's about cultural identity that marks whatever the spirits that they are producing, it's gonna be like. It's going to be something that any kind of traditional mezcal across Mexico has, that it's a communication between producer and the community where he works with and lives in, that they decide what type of flavors, what type of aromas, what type of everything, of identity these spirits have to have. So this is the beauty of these spirits, that it's not just like a result of a production, of a distilling production. It's a result of hundreds of years of cultural aspects that has to do with who's working with the firewood, who's working with the rocks that are used in the oven, and all of these materials and tools that they use while during the process of making mezcal, all of these agave spirits, these traditional agave spirits. So it's more about that than just to try to call it a marketing name or something that it's appealing to other markets. They actually, the true traditional spirits that are like that, they actually don't give a care. They don't give a fuck, man, about what an external market will think about them, or if they will like it or not. I mean, it's for them. So if they want to produce in a certain way and have a special taste, is because they like it. So if other people like it, fine. If not, well, I'm so sorry. So that's actually what we try to preserve with Mezonte, to try to have no filter or any kind of translation in between, or to please any kind of market. It's just like, do you want to know what a traditional mezcal is? Well, this is how it's done in this very small community, and this is how they do it for themselves. You might like it, you might not, but it's not made for us. It's made for them, and that's just that. I don't know.
That was, man, I can't believe you got that much information into about 10 minutes of speaking. I really hope that sometime I can figure out how to be as efficient. I know that you talk about this all the time. So do I, but I have a long way to go before I can get to be that efficient in how much information I'm sharing and how clearly I'm doing it. So one of the things that we talked about at the top of the show or before we jumped on, and one of the reasons we wanted to do kind of that little, that mini seminar, I guess, was because, you're talking about how these terms, these words, they're rooted in culture, they're rooted in history, they're rooted in linguistics. But that's changing a little bit, right? Obviously, you look at the DOs that exist currently in Mexico. Obviously, the one that I want to pick your brain a little bit about and maybe just inform people about what the status is the newest one, which is the denomination of origin for Raicilla specifically, which just got approved. I think the approval was early this year, no? And they're writing the DO, they're writing the NOM now. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, the approval for the DO was last year, and they started working on the NOM, like the official arm for it, and it's supposed to come out at the beginning of next year.
I know that obviously when, within the context of mezcal, whenever they're revising the DO or when they were revising the DO, and I wasn't active in the community in the agave space yet, but when they were originally writing the DO, they try to, or at least the Consejo makes the appearance of trying to travel around, holding sessions for producers to come and have their voices heard and have input on how the DO is being written, whether or not they're actually effective and whether or not that it's equitable, right? And they're providing fair access and ease of access for these producers and actually listening to their voice is up to debate, of course. I think you and I probably both have pretty strong opinions about those. How is it going for the Raicilla process? Are they doing a decent job of incorporating input? Are they giving producers access to the way that the DO is being structured, or is a lot of kind of the efforts just for show?
Very importantly, they are doing an awful work, and I'm sorry to say that because there was the opportunity to do it right. They had all the tools. They had all the information because it was nothing like, oh, we're missing this information. We didn't know about this or we didn't know about that. We actually, as a group, as Milpa, it's an organization, an AC.
Are you part of? I didn't realize you were active in Milpa. That's great.
Yeah. We did a forum, an open forum in Puerto Vallarta. That's like a middle of these two big regions, or the most important regions of Raicilla production. Just because that, I mean, they were saying that they were including a lot of people from all regions. They talked about all of the producers that were out there, and we're working on me, for example, working with the spirits and making some kind of research, but also with some friends that are biologists. They were making biological research over there. And we started asking, do you know about this? Do you know about the DO? Do you know what it works, how it works? What is it for? Have they told you something about it? And probably like 90% of them, they didn't know even what a DO was. Not even that they were invited to some stuff or anything like that, any kind of information, no, nothing. So we decided to make an open forum, inviting both producers, the people who were organizing this DO, the Consejo Mexicano Promotor de la Raicilla, that's like the promoter Raicilla Council from Mexico. We invited the lawyer who was actually the responsible for making the document to put out there, and it was supposedly to be for open for public to discuss. But there was just like this very small abstract of what the deal was and what it implied. And obviously it was only in internet. And as we might know, a lot of these producers don't have access to internet. So if they weren't informed and less have any kind of access to it, well, obviously they were completely put away to this participation. So we decided to make an open forum just to like having the best intentions of opening to the people and have a dialogue of what was happening. So we invited this lawyer who was responsible for that, and it's actually the same lawyer that works for the CRT, the Tequila Regulatory Council, and the CRM, so the Mezcal Regulatory Council. So sometimes you kind of like glimpse something that there's some kind of things going out there. And well, it was very. It went very well in terms of the turnout. A lot of producers from different regions were there. There was a table for discussion. Even, for example, other producers from other spirits, like Graciela Angeles from Real Minero, went all the way from Oaxaca to there. Miguel Angel Partida, who's also a mezcal producer, but here in southern Jalisco, went there to share their experiences of being inside and outside of a DO. And but the how people reacted to that people who are actually promoting this DO, it was like absolutely no, we don't want this, we don't agree with that. And it was in terms like, yeah, we're open to everything, but if you don't agree what we are proposing, then we're not that open, right? So it didn't went pretty well in terms of that, and it was very clear. Actually, I will share the link because that forum, it's in Spanish, obviously, but that forum is completely online through the page of Facebook page of Mezonte. And I'll share the link, and you can see everything that was talked there, and you can see how things didn't really went well because this DO it's constructed in a very perspective, in a very precise perspective, but only in economical sense. They're not taking care of preservation, not for culture, for agaves, for biological aspects, for traditional producers. I mean, everything is just sales directed. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing that we've seen in tequila, we've seen in mezcal, and how these things shift from being a traditional thing to go out to be just a producer of commodities for people and not understanding what's happening. Actually, I went to a meeting just like a couple of months ago in some region of the coast that there's, as I was telling you, this is the origin of the raicilla and the most active production in that region. And the president of this regulatory council for the raicilla has never set foot in there. Had never tried. I mean, I went there and I was like telling him, well, do you know about this? Are you telling me that this type of raicilla, for example, the raicilla from Japo, and it's not because we work with him, but it's probably the most recognized and respected raicilla producer all across Cabo Corrientes. And he didn't met him. He haven't tasted his raicilla. So right now, the people who are in this forum have more knowledge about the raicilla from the coast than the one who's is going to become the president of the regulatory council of raicilla. So it's kind of like absurd. And if you see the way that they're making all of these norms, it's just even worse. That the script of that DO document that was out there a year ago. So unfortunately, it's sad to see that we had all the tools to make it right for the first time in all these DOs for agave spirits, and they just decided to ignore everything and just set things to another massive production system to satisfy a market that actually doesn't sometimes understand this type of culture, and just sell it as just as another product. So it's kind of worrying, but we've seen this over and over, and we know that it's not going to be stopped. So we have to take other paths to go and make things even in a certain level. So that's what we're working on right now, to see other methods, other structures, to make a little bit, to compensate a little bit this type of behavior.
Can I ask? I mean, if you guys are still very well, first of all, I'm curious, what are you sipping on right now?
Oh, obviously, a raicilla from Japo. Yeah.
This is the one that I pulled off my shelf today. Is this one that like one of, I think it was the last bottle, I think you said, or one of the last bottles, and I was there with the Arizona group with David, and luckily nobody snatched it, and my buddy Doug convinced me to just grab it, and that's what I have today. So I'm very, very, very lucky about that.
That's a blend of one in a lifetime, probably. It's a blend of 11 different agaves, 11 different magueyes, and it's just a field that has 13 different types of different varieties of agave, and in that specific year, 11 were mature enough to be harvested and cooked in the same oven. So it's probably, I don't know how many years it's gonna take to have that timing for 11 to be ripe. So I should have probably just have one bottle of that, and that's it. So.
And that is from like the area around Zapotitlan, right?
Yeah, in Chancuella is the name of the specific community, but yeah.
Chancuella, okay, Chancuella is how you say it. That's, yeah, man. I can't believe that I was lucky enough to snatch that, and I'm glad that I had you on. I got to show that off today, so that everybody at home can be jealous, and I can start to get messages about how to get a 50 ml, or how I can ship them a sample or something, because I'm sure somebody's going to do it.
Yeah.
What, if it's a little too early in the process, or you guys aren't, feel free to defer. But just because we're on the topic, and because it's something that applies across so many, across all the categories, what are some of the strategies that you guys are looking at to counterbalance the momentum and the direction that, the DO structures are heading?
Well, first and most important of all, it's information. Is to talk about it, to get people informed, and from there you can do a lot of things. I mean, there's always even if it's a cliche, but it's true. When one door closes, another one opens. So we might be looking for other ways of commercializing. It's not the first time that it's been blocked or facing obstacles or anything like that. These agave spirits, and us as a group, as a network of biologists, anthropologists, producers, just people who are really interested in these spirits. And definitely what we're trying to do, and what we've done so far from a long time ago, is to inform people so they don't have to depend on looking for a word in a label just to try to trust in that. I mean, if it says, for example, right now, I mean, if it says mezcal, well, you know that it has, it's backed up by this certification of mezcal. But we know that there are some other that are not certified because they decide not to certify, or because they aren't able to certify because different reasons, but that they can be agave spirits that are as good or even more quality than some that that have the name of mezcal in their labels. So, and we can see very industrial type of mezcales, and they can call it mezcal even if a mezcal wouldn't be industrial. I mean, if a mezcal is industrial, for me, it's not a mezcal, right? So people have learned that even if it says mezcal, it doesn't mean that it's a great spirit. I mean, it works with certain rules that there are, but those rules don't really represent quality or tradition. They most of the time refer to production methods and production tools, even not even methods, but tools that are used in those productions. So if people sometimes see and taste and make some tests, little tests to the mezcales that they're drinking, they might know, like, well, maybe you're telling me that this is a very good mezcal, but I'm seeing for myself that it isn't. I mean, I'm looking for the pearls or the conchas in the bottle, and it's not happening. I'm smelling it, but it doesn't really have a good smell or a good aroma. It doesn't last long. If you taste it, it tastes more like water than to mezcal and stuff like that. And so we don't want to tell people what to drink or what to think. We're just giving them tools to make their own judgments. And obviously the industry is not giving you these tools. They're just saying, oh, this is a great thing. This is what you should drink and this is what you should buy. And that's it. Believe me. I mean, George Clooney is behind it. So obviously it's a good mezcal, right? So stuff like that. I mean, so we go back to the first thing that we were talking about. People are a little bit, even if it's a little bit informed, they don't go for those gags, right? They do know that there's more to it, not just a pretty face in the label or in the advertising. So I think information, first of all, is what we have to depend on, and then, well, we can look for other ways or other systems to commercialize these agave spirits, these traditional agave spirits. So it's going to be interesting, and we're going to depend on more people like yourself that are educating a lot of people in different levels and areas, like from restaurants, from bars, from consumers, like regular consumers, that will be informed and will help us to make this clear and to make it fair for the real traditional producers of agave spirits.
One of the questions I have, we've talked about, we obviously, you and I talk about all the time, the word tradition. Obviously, you can't really escape it when you're talking about these spirits. But I'm curious if, the attention that has been shown on these spirits in the last few years, has that incentivized new producers to enter the market? And, are there new projects that you're excited about? I know that, a lot of the people that you work with are multi-generational producers, but I'm just really curious if it's inspired any new, really, I don't know, just incredibly skilled producers to come onto the market. I think I mentioned to you an example is Edgar and Alessandra Tospa, right? Two guys who didn't really have a history in their community or in their family of making agave spirits, but saw the opportunity, had the ambition to enter the space, and are now doing some really incredible mezcales. Are there some people in Jalisco who are doing the same thing? Me personally, obviously, we just talked about how there's always new brands popping up, but I haven't seen a ton of really incredible younger or old, but producers who are starting completely new projects that just decided to, try their hand at it and are doing something really interesting.
Well, there always is someone who's interesting and interested in making something. Even from the very traditional families, there's this grandson that has new ideas and want to try different stuff, and all right, let's do this type of blend or this type of fermentation process or whatever, right? In the traditional mezcal families. There are also other people who, for example, in Michoacan, I've seen those that are from families that are traditionally producers, but they are in regions that they are traditional producers of mezcal. So they do have part of the culture. Once again, it doesn't mean that if you know how the process is now that you know how to make mezcal. That's just like the technical thing. But the know-how, it's the most important thing, and also the social implications of that. So if you're part of the society and part of the community, and not your father didn't make mezcal, your uncle didn't make mezcal, no one that you know make mezcal, or well, not that you know, but really close to you. But you've tried mezcal, like traditional mezcal. Well, you can probably, and that's what has happened in Michoacan, in certain producers, that they are just new to that without a direct family being involved. But it's in their part of their social context. Mm-hmm. So they know how that mezcal should taste like. They know how a good mezcal should taste like, what type of characteristics it should have. And so they can start working. For example, Don Lupe Perez, he was an agronomist. He didn't have any kind of family who was working mezcal, but he got close to a very, very old producer, a very good producer from Sitio, and learned how to make mezcal from him. And he just started, and he makes an amazing mezcal right now. So in that sense, I do believe in this type of new producers. What I'm kind of doubtful is sometimes where people in the city or people in regions that aren't really traditional for mezcal start making mezcal, right? Because once again, it's not about the process. The process can be learned very easily. I mean, in certain way. It has a certain and a very specific types of processes that you should follow. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be a traditional mezcal producer. Yeah. It doesn't really mean that you are completely involved in that culture. For people that has asked me, for example, I want to start a mezcal brand, right? It's always like that. And my response is, okay, you should go to that region where you want to start to making mezcal, where there's already mezcal produced, and stay there for a year before starting to think about making mezcal. If you are deeply into that community and you understand the community and how it works and what it needs to make mezcal, then if you go through that year and you say, yes, I still want to make mezcal, and I do believe I can make a traditional mezcal like that, well, go ahead. But at least you'll already understand what the mezcal process is all about. And not only like the technical process, but all the social process. If you understand that, you'll make it with respect. If you don't understand that and you just walk in there and say, oh yeah, what you need is to do this and this and that, and then I'll have my mezcal and I'll bottle it up and then send it to another state or country or continent, well, you're not really understanding what mezcal is all about. Especially if you want to make business with that. If you really want to make a fortune or something like that, mezcal is not the option. If you want to do it right, at least. Yeah. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. And if you want to pay it right to the producers who you're working with, well, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be a long-term career. It's not a fast track for making money. So you really have to be in love with mezcal to start a mezcal brand. I would say so. I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I struggle with is, I try not to completely write them off. I admire ingenuity. I admire ambition. I admire the entrepreneurial spirit. But at the same time, people who are experimenting with producing agave spirits, not even in communities in Mexico that don't have a history, or the United States, but, places around the world, right, where the plant doesn't even have a history of. And That's nothing against their intentions or the type of people that they are. They could be wonderful people, but I have trouble wrapping my head around how you can manufacture, or not manufacture, but how you can produce a spirit that doesn't have that cultural context behind it,
Well,
and that biological history behind it.
no, of course, and I've talked about and have really interesting discussions with Ivan Saldaña
Yeah,
of this, and it's beautiful because we get very intense about it. And what we do believe, we both believe that as you say, no, there's a lot of opportunity, and it shouldn't be like prohibit for someone to try to create something. But what I do believe is that if you're going to try something different, something new, something from without that tradition, well, then don't call it mezcal, then don't call it raicilla, don't call it tepe,
yeah,
call it an experimental agave spirit or whatever you want to call it. But don't try to hang yourself from something that has a really rich and profound cultural background,
yeah,
because you are not part of that. It's just like me trying to be a native Mexican from the Tepehuanes and or the Huicholes, the Huiráricas, or something like that. As hard as I can try, as hard as I can dress up like them and learn the language and whatever, I'm not a Huirárica. I'm from Mexico City, and that won't change a thing. So just, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's ubícate, like put yourself in your place. And it doesn't mean that you don't valorate it, you don't you don't acknowledge all the cultural things, but don't call it as another thing.
yeah,
It's like, I don't know, it's just like, for me, and I'm sorry, sometimes it's I don't know if it, I'm sorry if it's rude for someone, but it's just like these vegetarian meatballs. It's just like, what? There's not such thing as that. I mean, it's just like, well, it's another thing. It's a bowl of soya, or I don't know, anything like that.
yeah,
But don't call it what it's not. Call it as you want and do whatever you want to call it. But it's just another thing, and it's fair to try it and to do experiments with that. But then don't call it mezcal or raicilla or anything like that. If have a little, for me, it would be to have a little respect to the ones that are truly traditional to that. That's just it.
The one thing I will say to not do is to distill agave syrup. That's the one thing I will say.
Yeah, please.
At least use an agave plant, right? Take the time to at least cook an agave before you start thinking that the world needs whatever distillate you want to create.
Please do so.
Well, Pedro, I think that's a wonderful note to end it on, man. I think it really helps put kind of a bow on the context of agave spirits, not just in Jalisco, but around the world now, right? Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. One of the things that does make me hopeful, kind of touching on the topics that we were talking about earlier, is that information is so much more easily transmitted now, that I think it's a lot easier to educate consumers and bartenders than it was 10, 20 years ago, and just sharing access to what agave spirits are, what raicilla is or isn't, the cultural context. And, it's not the same as visiting there, but I think it means a lot that people can, not to tout ourselves, but can watch a film like Spirit of a Nation, or the film that you guys have done one or two films now. I thought you guys did a second.
No, just one. We're working on another one, actually from raicilla.
Good you. Agave es vida. Is that available? Is that available to download anywhere at all? Do people have access to that?
To Viva Mezcal, yeah, it's on Vimeo. I'll share the link too.
Cool. So yeah. If you could please share Viva Mezcal. I don't think I mentioned how to view that last time. So if you want to share the link to me, and then I'll put it out on our social media later this afternoon. Things like that. You guys have wonderful access to knowledge, and as close as you could possibly be to getting there without getting there. So that does make me hopeful for educating people and hopefully steering things in the right direction.
Agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, my friend. Please take care of yourself, and hopefully we'll see you sometime next year.
Thank you. I really hope so, and I hope that everyone that was watching this have a good time or learn something.
I'm sure they did, man. I'm sure they did on both accounts. We always do.
Okay.
Thank you, bud. Take
Right.
care. Adios.
See you.